The moment he reached for his bride's hand, the sound of wailing shattered the silence. Two little voices cut through the music, piercing, desperate, and raw. His twins, usually cheerful and shy around strangers, broke down in such an uncontrollable way that every guest at the ceremony froze in place. People glanced around, confused, whispering, some even frowning, but what unsettled everyone most was the look on the groom's face. He wasn't just embarrassed, he looked afraid, as if their cries carried a truth no one else could hear. The bride tightened her smile, determined to push forward, but the children's sobs grew louder, their tiny hands reaching out, trembling, as though begging for something no one could understand. And then, before anyone could intervene, the maid, standing quietly at the side, took a step forward. What she did next stunned the entire room. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. Adrian was the kind of man people admired from a distance. A self-made millionaire who built his fortune in real estate, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had known both triumph and loss. Years earlier, tragedy had torn through his life when his first wife, mother of his twins, passed away suddenly, leaving him to navigate fatherhood alone. Despite his wealth, Adrian was not untouched by grief. He poured his heart into raising his children, shielding them from the emptiness that loss had carved into their lives. To the outside world, he was the image of resilience, an accomplished man who could rebuild from ruins. But those closest to him knew that the smile he wore often masked exhaustion, loneliness, and the lingering question of whether happiness would ever find him again. Working quietly in the background of this story was Clara, the maid. She wasn't the kind of person most guests would notice at a grand wedding. She moved with humility, folding napkins, serving food, sweeping corners that no one thought twice about. For years she had been in Adrian's home, caring for his children when his work demanded long nights, making sure their laughter wasn't drowned by silence. To the twins, Clara wasn't just the maid, she was warmth, safety, and often the only one who truly listened. Yet in the eyes of the wealthy guests gathered that day, she was invisible, a figure who belonged in the shadows of chandeliers and polished marble floors. What few realized was that Clara saw more than anyone else. She had noticed changes, small details others dismissed, and her instincts told her something about this wedding didn't feel right. The bride-to-be, however, commanded the room in a way Clara never could. Her name was Elena, a woman whose elegance drew admiration the moment she entered any space. Dressed in couture and surrounded by friends who adored her, she looked every bit the perfect match for Adrian. Some saw her as a symbol of hope for a man who had endured too much heartache, a second chance at love he deserved. But others, whispering behind champagne glasses, weren't so sure. Was Elena truly devoted, or was she more enchanted by the life Adrian's fortune offered? Questions lingered, unspoken yet heavy in the air. And as the guests smiled for photographs and toasted to love, the twins' cries served as a reminder that children often see truths adults choose to ignore. Because behind the glittering chandeliers, whispers of secrets lingered. And one woman, quiet, underestimated, and often overlooked, knew more than anyone realized. Adrian had always believed he could balance the weight of his past with the promise of a new beginning, but reality was harsher than he expected. Between business meetings, raising his twins, and preparing for his second marriage, he found himself stretched thin, his heart caught in two worlds. Some evenings, after long dinners where Elena dazzled their guests, Adrian would step away to check on his children, only to find them distant, withdrawn, or clinging to Clara rather than him. He told himself they just needed time, that children were slow to accept change. Yet deep down, the father in him couldn't ignore the way their eyes clouded when Elena entered the room, or how their laughter dimmed in her presence. It wasn't defiance. It was fear. And Adrian, blinded by his own desire for happiness, mistook their silence for adjustment, never realizing it was a warning. For the twins, life had always been fragile after their mother's passing. Clara filled the spaces their father couldn't, reading bedtime stories, braiding hair, soothing nightmares when tears refused to stop. She became the quiet constant in a home that often felt too large and too empty. When Elena appeared, Clara noticed the children drawing back, their trust curling into hesitation. They avoided her touch, hid behind door frames, whispered in hushed voices when they thought no one was listening. Clara tried to reassure them, tried to believe Elena's arrival would mean stability, but her instincts pulled in another direction. She paid attention to the subtle flinches, the nervous fidgeting, the way their little bodies stiffened when Elena's hand rested too long on their shoulders. To the outside world, these were small details, but Clara knew better. She saw the truth forming in the children's eyes. The deeper Clara looked, the more unsettled she became. Adrian's love for Elena blinded him to the cracks spreading across his family. Guests praised the couple's elegance, but Clara noticed Elena's fleeting glances of irritation when the children interrupted, her carefully masked annoyance when sticky fingers touched expensive fabric. These weren't just passing frustrations. They revealed a heart less patient than Adrian believed. And though Clara kept her silence, her loyalty belonged to the children. She tucked them in at night, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "You're safe. I won't let anyone hurt you." But even as she spoke those words, the cries at the wedding echoed back in her mind. Because the twins weren't crying because of nerves. And what Clara knew could destroy everything. The wedding was meant to be a celebration of love, yet the air around it grew heavy with unspoken doubts. Guests whispered at the tables, hiding their words behind champagne flutes and polite smiles. Some wondered if Adrian had rushed too quickly into another marriage, still carrying the weight of a wife lost too soon. Others questioned whether Elena was prepared for the responsibility of raising children who still clung to memories of their mother. These murmurs never reached Adrian's ears. He chose to hear only the music, the laughter, and the surface-level cheer. But Clara, moving quietly through the room, caught every fragment of conversation. She knew the doubts weren't baseless. She had seen them unfold in subtle moments, the twins shrinking away, Adrian stretching himself thin, and Elena's charm that sometimes felt more like performance than sincerity. Elena's friends, polished and poised, often kept a watchful eye on Clara. To them, the maid was too close to the children, too comfortable in roles that didn't belong to her. They questioned why the twins clung to Clara when they should have been warming up to their future stepmother. More than once, Clara caught Elena's friends exchanging sharp looks, their whispers slicing through her presence like invisible knives. "She's overstepping," one of them muttered when Clara bent to tie a shoelace or calm a frightened cry. But Clara did not answer back. She had no place in their world of silk gowns and glittering jewelry. Her place was at the children's side, whether anyone approved or not. And though Adrian never doubted her intentions, she began to sense a growing tension, a silent war between her devotion to the children and the bride's circle of influence. Clara's own needs faded quietly into the background. She worked long hours, often skipping meals so the children's plates would be full, often waking in the night to hush their sobs so Adrian could rest. Her dreams of a life beyond service had been packed away years ago, tucked into corners of her heart she no longer opened, but sacrifice became second nature to her. Each time the twins reached for her hand instead of Elena's, Clara felt the weight of her responsibility deepen. She wasn't their mother, but in many ways, she was their shield, the only barrier standing between them and a change they did not want. Yet with each passing day, Clara sensed the storm building, one that might strip her of the only role she had left. And as the night carried on, no one realized the depth of what was unfolding. The children's cries weren't born from nerves, nor from stubbornness. The truth behind their tears was darker than anyone expected. And it was a truth Clara had kept locked inside, knowing that once revealed, nothing would ever be the same again. For a time, Adrian believed his life was finding balance again. The wedding plans moved forward, the house filled with fresh flowers, laughter returned to the halls, and Elena played the role of the doting fiancée with grace. To outsiders, it looked like a family mending itself. But beneath the polished surface, Clara saw fractures widening. The twins refused to call Elena Mom, their voices quiet but firm, their rejection hidden behind small acts, turning their faces away when she leaned in to kiss them goodnight, pulling back their hands when she tried to hold them. To Adrian, these were simply growing pains. But to Clara, they were warnings. And then, just when everything seemed perfect, the mask slipped. It happened late one evening when Clara went to collect linens from the study. She stopped at the door, her breath catching as voices drifted through the crack. Elena's words were sharp, calculated, nothing like the soft tones she used with Adrian. She spoke on the phone, her voice laced with irritation, hinting at plans that had nothing to do with love. Clara froze as she heard Elena speak of Adrian's wealth, not as a blessing, but as a prize. And worse still, she mentioned another man, someone waiting for her after the vows were exchanged. The realization struck Clara like ice. Elena wasn't building a family. She was building a facade, and Adrian was at the center of it. But Clara wasn't the only one who knew. Whispers traveled quickly in circles where money was at stake. A bridesmaid confided in hushed tones that she had seen Elena in secret meetings, always careful, always hidden, but never alone. Clara pieced together fragments, missed calls, unexplained absences, gifts that couldn't be traced to Adrian. The truth was undeniable. Elena's heart wasn't in this marriage, and Adrian was walking into a betrayal that could ruin more than his fortune. It could break the fragile hearts of his children once more, and though Clara carried the weight of what she knew, she wasn't sure how to act. Should she protect Adrian from the truth and risk losing the children's trust, or expose Elena and risk destroying the very peace Adrian longed for? Adrian would soon face the most difficult decision of his life. The ceremony pressed forward, but the warmth of celebration began to fade into something colder, heavier. The guests could sense it. The children's unease wasn't hidden anymore. It clung to every step, every hesitant glance. As Adrian led Elena down the aisle, his twins clutched each other's hands tightly, their faces pale, their bodies stiff. Guests whispered, shifting uncomfortably in their seats, some pretending not to notice while others stared openly. The music swelled, the vows were spoken. But beneath it all, there was a tension so thick it almost drowned out the joy. And though Elena smiled, her lips trembling at the corners, she could feel the eyes on her, studying, questioning, wondering if the perfection she displayed was real or carefully rehearsed. Clara watched in silence, her heart pounding with each passing moment. The weight of what she knew pressed against her chest, making every breath feel like betrayal. If she spoke, she risked humiliating Adrian in front of everyone he knew, shattering his hope for a new beginning. If she stayed silent, she condemned the children to a life overshadowed by a woman whose intentions were rooted not in love, but in deception. The question clawed at her mind. Was it her place to intervene, or was she stepping into territory where she had no right to stand? She had no title, no blood tie, nothing but loyalty. And sometimes, loyalty was a dangerous reason to act. The guests, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface, continued to murmur. Some praised Elena's composure, mistaking her trembling smile for nerves, while others noted the children's refusal to inch closer to her, their bodies leaning instinctively toward Clara whenever she was near. Adrian, caught in the middle, seemed determined to ignore what unfolded before him. He gripped Elena's hand tightly, as though holding on to the idea of happiness he had fought so hard to find. Yet even he could not completely ignore the glances, the unease, the subtle shift in the air. Doubt had begun to creep in, and once it enters a heart, it never leaves quietly. And then came the moment that froze every guest in place. Just as Elena prepared to say the final words that would seal their vows, the twins burst into tears once more, louder and more desperate than before. Their cries echoed against the marble walls, piercing through every carefully spoken phrase. Adrian turned, torn between duty and fatherhood, while Elena's mask faltered, her irritation flashing just long enough for others to see. And what happened next would shock every guest to their core. The cries grew unbearable, echoing through the grand hall like a truth no one wanted to hear. Guests shifted in their seats, their unease spilling into whispers that even the music could no longer mask. Adrian froze, torn between the vows he was about to complete and the desperate pleas of his children. And then, quietly but with undeniable resolve, Clara stepped forward. She moved past the rows of guests, her hands steady as she knelt beside the twins, gathering them into her arms. Their sobs softened the moment her touch reached them, their little hands clinging tightly to her dress as though she was the only anchor they could trust. In that instant, all eyes turned, not to the bride, not to Adrian, but to Clara. The contrast was impossible to ignore. While Clara soothed with tenderness, Elena stood rigid, her smile fractured, her eyes betraying irritation rather than compassion. The room caught it, the flash of coldness, the fleeting grimace at the disruption. It was subtle, but enough. The whispers grew louder, guests trading glances as realization crept into their faces. Adrian's gaze lingered on Clara cradling the children, then shifted slowly to Elena. For the first time, he saw not the elegant woman who had promised to restore his happiness, but the cracks beneath her mask. And as if fate demanded it, the truth revealed itself not through confrontation, but through a careless slip of Elena's own tongue. Frustration broke her composure. With eyes darting and voice sharp, she hissed words meant for the children alone, but caught by the ears of those closest to her. "Enough already. You'll ruin everything." Gasps rippled through the room, shock spreading like fire. The tenderness Clara displayed against Elena's cruelty painted the truth clearer than any evidence could. It wasn't the children who were out of place, it was the bride. And in that moment, Adrian's heart sank under the weight of clarity. In that instant, the fairy tale collapsed. But a new truth began to rise. Silence fell over the room, heavier than the music that had stopped mid-note. Adrian stood at the altar, his hand slipping slowly from Elena's grasp. His eyes lingered on his children, still clinging tightly to Clara, their sobs finally quiet in her arms. For the first time, he saw everything clearly. The woman who had promised him love had revealed only impatience, while the woman who had been overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed as just the maid had shown nothing but loyalty and compassion. Adrian's voice broke the silence, firm yet trembling. The wedding was over. Guests gasped, some in disbelief, others in quiet nods of understanding. Elena's mask cracked completely, her protests laced with anger rather than heartbreak, but Adrian no longer listened. His choice had been made. The twins buried their faces against Clara's shoulder as if to hide from the chaos around them. Adrian watched, his heart aching with both regret and relief. He had nearly traded the safety of his children for an illusion, blinded by his own longing for happiness. In Clara's arms, he saw what he had been searching for all along, not grandeur, not perfection, but truth. It struck him then that love didn't always announce itself with diamonds, gowns, and applause. Sometimes it appeared quietly, woven into years of sacrifice, in late nights soothing children who weren't her own, in whispered promises to keep them safe when no one else could. Clara had never asked for recognition, yet in that moment she became more than just the maid. She became the proof that trust and love are not built on appearances, but on actions lived out in silence. Sometimes love doesn't arrive in diamonds and gowns, but in quiet moments of sacrifice, loyalty, and truth. And on that day, Adrian chose not the fantasy he thought he wanted, but the family he already had. When the last guest had left and the hall stood empty, Adrian sat in the silence of his own choices. What should have been a wedding day had instead become a day of truth, a day when masks fell, and love revealed itself in the most unexpected form. He had learned that family is not built on appearances or grand gestures, but on the quiet, steady presence of those who remain when everything else fades away. Clara, once overlooked, had become the heart his children trusted and the soul that anchored his home. And in the eyes of his twins, Adrian finally understood what love truly meant. But I want to leave you with a question. What would you have done if you were in Adrian's shoes? Should he forgive the bride or follow his heart? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. And if this story moved you, hit the like button and subscribe for more powerful stories every single week.